Good morning, students. Today, let me continue with that rabbit type study, part 3, wherein you are discussing about nervous system and cranial nerves in rabbit. In case of this rabbit, like in case of other vertebrate animals, the nervous system is well developed, and as it is a mammalian animal, it is having a well developed nervous system. And as far as your syllabus is concerned, you will have to concentrate only on the central nervous system but not on the other part of the nervous system. Like in other vertebrates, the nervous system in rabbit is also has three main divisions like central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and autonomic nervous system. Coming to central nervous system, it includes brain and spinal cord. And the first part is brain, wherein the brain lies within the cranial cavity of the skull. It is a soft, white, somewhat flattened and nearly twice as long as wide. It is covered over by three membranes collectively known as meninges. They are inner pia mater, middle arachnoid and outermost dura mater. So it is same as in case of the human brain also. And the brain is hollow from within, and the cavities of the brain are called ventricles, and these are filled with lymph-like cerebrospinal fluid, popularly abbreviated as CSF. It is secreted by the anterior and posterior choroid plexus, a network of blood capillaries found inside the brain. And coming to the parts of the brain. Brain of rabbit has three main divisions like forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. The first division, forebrain, which is also called prosencephalon, and it includes olfactory lobes, two cerebral hemispheres, and a diencephalon. The first part of this forebrain is olfactory lobes. These are a pair of small club-shaped olfactory lobes or the bulbs that are present in the anteriormost part of the brain. And the narrow cavity of each olfactory lobe is called the first ventricle or rhinocele. It opens posteriorly into the cerebral hemisphere of its side, and the sense of smell is controlled by the olfactory lobes. So that is the function of olfactory lobes. Then the second main division is cerebral hemispheres, and the two cerebral hemispheres are separated by a deep longitudinal median fissure, and they are narrow in front but broad behind and nearly smooth surfaced. They are so large that they overlap the diencephalon and midbrain and almost touch the cerebellum behind. And they form nearly 2/3 of the entire brain, and the two hemispheres are connected by a band of nerve tissue, the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is a characteristic feature of placental mammals, and the inner cavity of each hemisphere is called second ventricle or lateral ventricle, which is also called as paracele. And the cerebral hemispheres are the seat of highly complicated activities such as thought, reasoning, memory, intelligence, etc. So these are the features of cerebral hemispheres, the second main component of the forebrain. Now coming to the diencephalon. The diencephalon is small and depressed, and it lies covered below the backward extension of the cerebral hemispheres. And its cavity is called the third ventricle or diastole, and the roof of the diencephalon is called epithalamus, while the floor is hypothalamus. And the two lateral thickened walls are optic thalami. The roof of the diencephalon has a slender pineal stalk carrying a small rounded pineal body, an endocrine gland, and ventrally the floor of the diencephalon projects into a median rounded infundibulum. Its lower end carries an oval shaped Rathke's pouch or hypophysis. Infundibulum together with hypophysis constitute pituitary body. So pituitary body is located in this hypophysis region. And just in front of the infundibulum lies the crossing of the two optic nerves called optic chiasma. Diencephalon controls the perception of chemicals, temperature, reproduction, metabolism, and autonomous nervous system. So this is with reference to diencephalon, the third part of the forebrain. Now coming to the midbrain, also technically known as mesencephalon. It is the small middle part of the brain which is partly concealed below the cerebral hemispheres. Dorsally, it has four small rounded optic lobes collectively called corpora quadrigemina. The anterior two optic lobes are larger, called superior colliculi, and they are concerned with sight, that is vision. The posterior two optic lobes are smaller, called inferior colliculi, and they are concerned with acute hearing. The cavity of the midbrain is a narrow longitudinal passage called iter, and its floor is formed by thick tracts of the fibers called crura cerebri, which link the fore and hindbrains together. Now, the third component or the third division of the brain called hindbrain, also called rhombencephalon because of its diamond shape, and it includes cerebellum, pons varolii, and medulla oblongata. The first part, cerebellum. It is very well developed and consists of a large median lobe, the vermis, and the two lateral lobes. There is no cavity inside cerebellum, but its surface is much folded, and it controls equilibrium and coordination of voluntary muscular movements. Then this will be the diagram of that brain of this rabbit, wherein you can see the different parts that have been mentioned over here. So this this is actually the ventral surface of the brain, wherein you can see the optic chiasma, which thing I already mentioned in the previous slide, and there will be the projection called corpus albicans, which is a whitish part of that brain, and there will be the lobes like frontal lobe, parietal lobe, and olfactory lobe, and and there will be sylvian fissure, what is known as the deep longitudinal fissure, that is on the and on the right side, and there will be the lobe called temporal lobe, and there will be the region called cerebellum, which is the one of the important part of the hindbrain. And the continued part of that cerebellum is what is known as medulla oblongata, which continues with the spinal cord. So this is with reference to the ventral view of the brain of the rabbit. So this diagram is important from the point of view of your examination. And this is the dorsal view of this brain of this rabbit body. And as you see here, this will be the olfactory lobe, which is well developed here when compared to the human brain. And there will be the frontal lobe and cerebral hemispheres, and then there will be a parietal lobe, and then the deep longitudinal median fissure. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a body called pineal body, which is an endocrine gland which produces the hormone which regulates the rhythms in our body, especially in the rabbit. And this is what the lateral lobe, that is the lobes of the hindbrain, and there will be a projection what is called as vermis. So that is what the important component of the hindbrain. So these are the some important features of the brain in case of rabbit, that to the dorsal view. Now coming to the next division of the hindbrain, that is pons varolii. It is a stout band of nerve fibers present on the ventral surface of the hindbrain, and it connects the left and right halves of the cerebellum. And medulla oblongata, it is the last part of the brain, and it is broad and triangular anteriorly, but tapers back into the spinal cord. So its cavity is called fourth ventricle or metacell, and it continues with the central canal of the spinal cord. Medulla oblongata and pons varolii control the involuntary activities like digestion, respiration, excretion, circulation, etc. Now, the next part of the central nervous system, the second main division, is what is called as spinal cord. It is long, whitish, thick-walled tube of nervous tissue present within the neural canal of the vertebral column. And it starts from the medulla oblongata of the brain, gradually tapers up to the fourth lumbar vertebra, and then terminates into a non-nervous thread, the filum terminale, which extends into the tail also. And it shows two slight enlargements, the branchial and sciatic swellings, at the levels of fore and hind limbs respectively. Nerves to the two limbs arise from these swellings. And like brain, the spinal cord is also surrounded by three membranes or meninges. They are pia mater, arachnoid and dura mater. So this will be the brief explanation about the spinal cord. And coming to the cranial nerves, the last part of this video or the class. And the brain of the rabbit has 12 pairs of cranial nerves, as you know. And out of this, the first 10 pairs of cranial nerves are essentially same as that of fishes and amphibians, while the two additional pairs include the spinal accessory, that is 11th one, and hypoglossal, that is 12th one. So this will be a chart which is showing you each and every detail of this different types of cranial nerves. So on the first row, so in the first column you will see the presence of the serial number, and in the second one name and the branch of the cranial nerve and its nature in the third column, and its origin in the fourth column, and distribution in the fifth column. The first one, that is called the first cranial nerve, called olfactory nerve. It is purely somatic sensory nerve, and its origin is from anterior end of the olfactory lobe, and its distribution is mucous membranes of the nasal sacs. Second one, optic nerves. It is having the nature of purely somatic as well as sensory nerve, and it is originated from ventrolateral part of the optic lobe, and its distribution is towards retina of the eye. And the third cranial nerve will be oculomotor nerve, which is somatic as well as motor nerve, and its origin is from ventral surface of the midbrain, that is especially from crura cerebri, and its distribution is towards the muscles of the eye, that is internal, superior, rectus, inferior and inferior oblique muscles. Then fourth one, trochlear nerve, also called pathetic nerve, which is somatic as well as motor in nature, and its origin is from dorsally between the two optic lobes and cerebellum, and its distribution is towards fifth muscle of the eye, that is superior oblique muscles. Then the fifth one, trigeminal nerve. It has three branches like ophthalmic, maxillary and mandibular, wherein ophthalmic is having the nature of mixed nerve as well as somatic and sensory, and it is having its origin from anterolateral part of the medulla oblongata. Then its distribution is towards the skin of the snout. Then the second branch of the trigeminal nerve, maxillary. It is having the nature of nerve, especially the somatic and sensory, and it also has the same origin because it is one of the branch of this fifth cranial nerve called trigeminal nerve. And its distribution is towards the skin of the upper jaw and lower jaw, the eyelid, And the third branch is called mandibular, which is a nerve having mixed nature and having the same origin, and it innervates muscles of the lower jaw and its skin muscles. Then abducens nerve, that is the sixth cranial nerve. It is somatic in nature as well as motor in nature, and having the origin from ventral side of the medulla oblongata, and it innervates the muscles of the eye. Then seventh cranial nerve, that is called facial nerve, which is having the two subdivisions, the branches called palatine and hyomandibular, wherein palatine is mixed nerve or a visceral nerve, whereas the hyomandibular is sensory nerve, or it is also sometimes behaving like visceral motor nerve also. And both these nerves have originated from lateral parts of the medulla oblongata, wherein they have the distribution like mucous membrane, that is roof of the buccal cavity, and the muscles of the lower jaw and hyoid apparatus respectively. Then the eighth cranial nerve, auditory nerve, having the somatic nature and sensory nature also, and originated from lateral parts of the medulla oblongata, and it innervates internal ear, that is auditory organ. Then the ninth one is glossopharyngeal, and its nature is sending the branch to the facial nerve, and it is both mixed as well as sensory as well as visceral in nature, and having the origin from lateral parts of the medulla oblongata. And the branches of this nerve innervates mucous membranes of the tongue, pharynx, and muscles of the hyoid apparatus. Then the 10th cranial nerve, that is vagus nerve. It is having 5 sub-branches like cutaneous, cardiac, laryngeal, pulmonary, and gastric, wherein cutaneous is having the nature of mixed nerve, that is both somatic and visceral, whereas cardiac is both sensory and visceral, and even laryngeal is sensory and motor, and the pulmonary nerve, it is nerve which is said to be mixed in nature, and even the gastric nerve is mixed in nature. And all these nerves, or all these branches, 5 branches of the vagus nerve, they have originated from the lateral parts of the medulla oblongata, and they innervate the skin of the dermal body wall, heart, laryngotracheal chamber, lungs, and stomach respectively. Then the 11th cranial nerve, that is called spinal nerve or spinal accessory nerve, and it is having the nature of motor nerve, originated from medulla part of the medulla oblongata, and innervates muscles of the neck region. And the 12th cranial nerve, the last cranial nerve, which is hypoglossal in its technical name, and it is having the nature of motor nerve and originated again from medulla oblongata, and it innervates the muscles of the tongue. So this is with reference to the detailed information about the varieties of the cranial nerves in the rabbit body. So with that, I have completed this nervous system. Thank you.